Midnight Clear was not just a quiet war film. It was a haunting collision of idealism and shattered innocence that froze the human spirit in snow and silence. Behind its calm veneer, chaos erupted across the Utah mountains. The actors fought frostbite, the cameras jammed in the cold, and the director battled both time and nature to capture a dreamlike portrait of war that was far too real. Now, we are about to uncover 20 weird facts about A Midnight Clear, and when you reach the end, the bonus fact will completely change how you see this haunting masterpiece. Fact number 20. The war was shot in Utah, not Europe. What audiences never realized is that A Midnight Clear was filmed entirely in Utah rather than Europe. The mountains around Park City stood in for the Ardennes forest. The production crew built an entire chateau exterior from scratch and sculpted fake forests to mimic the dense woods of France. The terrain was brutal. Temperatures plummeted each night and the wind cut through every wool uniform like a knife. There were no comfortable trailers waiting nearby. The cast trudged through snow that reached their knees while the crew battled frozen cables and stiff camera gears. What looked serene on screen was a battlefield behind the lens. The cold carved realism into every frame. It was not a stage war. It was survival under a white sky. Fact number 19. The snow was man-made. The pure white snow that fills the film was not nature's gift. It was hard labor. Utah suffered a weak winter that year, and there simply was not enough snow to cover the set. So every morning, trucks arrived loaded with scraped snow gathered from parking lots and hillsides miles away. The crew shoveled it into place one wheelbarrow at a time. Each take destroyed the perfect landscape, and the crew had to rebuild it before the next shot. The result was beautiful but exhausting. They became sculptors of frost, creating their own frozen war zone. What looks untouched and silent on screen was rebuilt again and again by exhausted hands under a pale dawn. The snow became the movie's greatest illusion and its most demanding actor. Fact number 18. The coldest winter in 83 years. The winter that year struck Utah with the worst chill in 8 decades. Temperatures plunged below zero and refused to rise for days. Filming outdoors became a brutal test of endurance. The actors had to deliver lines while their breath turned to crystal clouds and their boots stiffened with ice. Heaters were forbidden on set because visible heat shimmer ruined the image. The director chose authenticity over comfort, and the crew paid the price. Some cameras froze solid and had to be warmed beside small fires between takes. The pain was real. When the characters shivered, they were not acting. What audiences saw was not theatrical discomfort. It was human endurance caught in a storm that refused to end. Fact number 17. The chateau was a ghost school. Haunting interior scenes were filmed not in a European mansion, but inside an abandoned school in Park City. The old building was set for demolition, so the production turned it into a wartime fortress. Classrooms became ruined dining halls, corridors turned into echoing staircases. The cast rehearsed among broken chalkboards and dusty lockers. At night, the empty halls groaned with wind and memories. It felt haunted in every sense. The set gave the film its eerie authenticity because it carried real decay. You can almost feel the ghosts of its past life in every creaking floorboard. The production saved thousands in costs but gained something more powerful than any set design. It captured the feeling of a place that had already died once before. Fact number 16. The story was inspired by a lie of peace. Author William Wharton based his novel on fragments of his own service, but the Christmas truce at the film's heart never happened in the Second World War. It was drawn from the famous truce of 1914 when enemies laid down arms for one night of peace. Wharton moved that myth into 1944 to expose how humanity collapses under the weight of repetition. What the movie shows is a dream that never existed. The soldiers' fragile ceasefire is a fantasy born from longing. Director Keith Gordon understood that power and filmed it with reverence, not realism. The lie becomes the truth within the story. It was not history retold. It was hope imagined and broken on screen for all time. Fact number 15. The cast faced real exhaustion. Every actor was pushed to their limit. Ethan Hawke was only 21, yet he found himself commanding scenes in freezing darkness with breathless urgency. The crew shot long nights that began before sunset and ended past dawn. The soldiers they played were meant to look weary and half-starved, so the director ordered them to eat lightly and sleep little. Their faces grew hollow, their eyes dim. The exhaustion that audiences see is not performance, it is truth. Each man carried heavy rifles that froze to their hands and wore boots that never dried. When they marched through the snow, they truly stumbled from fatigue. It was not method acting for show, it was survival for art, and the result drips with raw authenticity. Fact number 14. The director was barely out of his 20s. Keith Gordon, who directed A Midnight Clear, was younger than most of his cast. Once known as the awkward teenager from Back to School, he had transformed into a visionary filmmaker obsessed with moral contradictions. He fought to keep the tone quiet and poetic when financiers demanded more combat. Gordon refused to turn it into a typical war movie. He wanted silence, dread, and human fragility. Studio executives pushed for explosions and blood, but Gordon stood firm. The tension between money and meaning defined the shoot. What you feel in every frame is that tug of war between commerce and conscience. It was not rebellion for ego, it was devotion to truth, and it almost cost him his career. Fact number 13. The Germans were not villains. Most war films of the era portrayed Germans as faceless enemies, not this one. Gordon cast European actors who brought humility and fear rather than menace. They were exhausted young men hiding from a war they no longer believed in. The Americans were not their conquerors, they were their reflections. Many extras spoke little English, so the production created a language of gestures and emotion. The result was a haunting authenticity. The snow scenes where soldiers approach each other with trembling hands were improvised on the spot. They carried real tension because no one knew exactly what would happen. It was not scripted heroism. It was human confusion, and it made every encounter unbearably real. Fact number 12. A score born from silence. Composer Mark Isham was instructed to write a score that felt like a breath on glass. The director wanted the music to emerge from silence, not dominate it. Isham used muted horns and long, sustained tones that barely registered at first listen. The sound was meant to mimic the hum of falling snow and the heartbeat of fear. When editing began, the director removed nearly half the music to let the silence speak. The spaces between notes became more powerful than the melody itself. It was not music for war. It was a requiem for innocence. The result gave the film its dreamlike pulse and turned absence into its most haunting sound. Fact number 11. The ending almost got changed. Studio executives were terrified that audiences would reject the tragic finale. They proposed an alternate cut in which the surviving soldiers were rescued and the Germans forgiven. Keith Gordon refused. He argued that the entire story's weight rested on that devastating conclusion. He said peace without loss is false. The argument lasted for weeks and nearly derailed the film's release. In the end, the director won, but the compromise was a limited theatrical rollout. What you see today is his original vision, unsoftened and unredeemed. It was not made for applause. It was made to leave you quiet, stunned, and questioning what humanity really means when peace comes too late. Fact number 10. Ethan Hawke. Almost quit the film, Ethan Hawke entered the production straight after finishing Dead Poets Society, but A Midnight Clear shattered every comfort he had known on a Hollywood set. The isolation, the hunger, and the bone-deep cold broke his spirit halfway through filming. One night, after a 16-hour shoot in the snow, he told Keith Gordon He could not keep going. The director did not give a speech. He simply asked him to look around at the other young men who had come this far. Hawke stayed and gave the most mature performance of his early career. What looks like quiet command on screen was inner exhaustion. It was not polished acting. It was raw survival, and that is why his eyes seem haunted in every scene. Fact number 9. Gary Sinise fought to play the fragile soldier. Gary Sinise was still fresh from his acclaimed stage work when he joined the cast. He insisted on playing the soldier with a fragile mind rather than a commanding officer. He wanted to explore trauma, not power. The studio doubted his choice, but Gordon trusted him. Sinise isolated himself for days to build the character's instability. On set, he spoke little between takes and avoided eye contact to stay in the role. During one breakdown scene, he wept uncontrollably even after the camera stopped. The crew stayed silent, watching the truth of war unfold in front of them. It was not theatrical madness. It was empathy turned into performance, and it cemented Sinise as one of the most fearless actors of his generation. Fact number 8. The cameraman nearly lost his fingers. The temperature dropped so low during one exterior night shoot that the camera lenses froze solid. The cinematographer battled to keep the equipment alive by wrapping it in blankets and heating pads between takes. At one point, he removed his gloves to adjust a focus ring, and the metal burned into his skin. He had to pour warm water over his hands to break free. Still, he refused to stop filming. That dedication created the glistening frost effect seen in the dawn scenes. It was not post-production trickery, it was the price of realism paid in pain. The snow did not just cover the ground, it swallowed everyone who dared to tell this story. Fact number 7. Dialogue was rewritten on the spot. Keith Gordon refused to treat his script as sacred. He encouraged the actors to improvise their fear and uncertainty. Many of the most memorable lines were born in the moment, including the whispered prayers and desperate confessions. The cast huddled together between takes, debating what their characters would actually say in such despair. These discussions bled into the camera's gaze, creating a documentary-like immediacy. It was not about military orders or patriotic speeches. It was about confusion and loss. The silence between the men became the real dialogue. The words we hear are not scripted perfection. They are fragments of thought frozen in time, and that is why every scene feels heartbreakingly alive. Fact number 6. The production ran out of money midway. Halfway through filming, the budget collapsed. Snowstorms delayed the schedule, and the insurance company threatened to pull out. Crew members went unpaid for several weeks, yet they kept working out of loyalty to Gordon and the story. The director mortgaged part of his own home to keep cameras rolling. Meals were cut to one a day. Equipment was borrowed from local film students. Against all odds, they finished on time. That desperation left fingerprints on the final product. Every frame carries the tension of people who refused to quit. It was not luxury filmmaking. It was rebellion against failure, and the miracle is that it looks so calm when in truth everything behind it was falling apart. Fact number 5. The soldiers slept on set. To maintain the feeling of entrapment, the director ordered that the actors sleep inside the set during several key nights of shooting. The chateau interior was freezing and filled with smoke residue from staged explosions. The men slept in their uniforms with rifles at their sides, surrounded by flickering lanterns and echoing wind. The goal was to dissolve the line between actor and soldier. When they woke up to film the next morning, their faces carried the real look of exhaustion. Their whispers sounded genuine because they had lived the night as their characters. It was not rehearsal. It was immersion. That decision forged performances that feel painfully intimate and gave the film its unnerving sense of realism and dread. Fact number 4. The true scene was filmed in a single night. The haunting scene where the American and German soldiers meet under falling snow was shot in one continuous night. The snow machines broke halfway through, and real flakes began to fall as if on cue. The silence that fills that moment was not planned. The microphones picked up the soft hiss of snow landing on coats and rifles. The actors stopped speaking without instruction and simply stood facing one another, unsure whether the take was still running. The director let the camera roll until sunrise. That quiet truce, born from fatigue and real weather, became the emotional core of the movie. It was not choreography. It was nature guiding art in the stillness of a frozen dawn. Fact number 3. The film was nearly lost to distribution hell. After completion, the studio executives could not decide how to market it. It was too introspective for war audiences and too bleak for drama lovers. Screenings were canceled and release dates pushed back. Prints sat in storage for months while the cast waited helplessly. Ethan Hawke tried to promote it himself by calling critics and sending private screenings to journalists. His efforts saved the film from total obscurity. Though it never became a box office hit, it gained a devoted following among soldiers and artists who saw truth in its quiet agony. It was not failure. It was resurrection through persistence, and the film's cult status today exists because of that fight for survival. Fact number 2. The title came from a forgotten hymn. A Midnight Clear was named after a 19th-century Christmas carol called "It Came Upon the Midnight Clear." The hymn speaks of angels singing to weary men who cannot hear them through the noise of war. That idea became the film's spiritual anchor. Every time you hear wind howling across the snow, you are meant to imagine those unseen angels drowned by gunfire. The title is not about peace. It is about the silence that follows when hope collapses. The director used that concept to craft his tone of sadness and beauty woven together. It was not a random title. It was a requiem whispered through history and hidden beneath the white sky of December. Fact number 1. The ending mirrors real-life loss. When William Wharton watched the completed film, he reportedly wept because it mirrored the fate of his wartime unit. Though the truce itself was fictional, the sense of doomed brotherhood was drawn from truth. Several men he had known died during a meaningless patrol near Christmas, and the guilt followed him all his life. The film gave him closure and pain at once. That ending where peace shatters into death was his confession disguised as fiction. It was not just cinema. It was therapy carved in light and shadow. The story that began in memory ended in redemption, though no one truly survived its making either on screen or off. Bonus fact: the final snowfall was a gift from nature. The last shot of the movie, where snow falls softly over the abandoned battlefield, was not planned. As the crew prepared to wrap shooting, the sky opened and snow began to drift down in perfect stillness. The director called for one final take. The crew stood silent while the camera rolled. No sound, no cue, just the world finishing the story for them. That moment became the film's closing image, and no visual effect could have matched its power. It was not a miracle of editing. It was the earth itself, granting closure to a story about mercy and ruin. A Midnight Clear ended exactly as it began, with snow silence and a fragile hope that maybe kindness still exists. A Midnight Clear remains one of the most poetic war films ever created. It reminds us that silence can be louder than explosions, and that mercy can bloom even on a frozen battlefield. If you felt the chill of truth in these revelations, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe for more secrets buried behind the camera, where stories like this still breathe beneath the snow.